Okay.
All right, all right, all right.
All right. All right. All right.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of That's What He Said. And we are doing our June installment of our Ancient Influencers.
Yes.
And we love these episodes. I was just telling Lex, it's really nice. I was getting really hyped up today for the episode because it's nice to take a little bit of the pressure off of a lot of our episodes. We're interpreting what God is saying and we're applying it to life and our feelings and things. But with this Ancient Influencers, we're really telling the story of a person. We're kind of doing a biography of someone, a little short glimpse at a Bible character. And so it's really fun and it's exciting and it's like this little research project.
And focus on an individual who already has a pre-existing story and just diving into their background and just it is like a fun little project.
And this one, we're not going to quite get there yet, but this one's different than any of the others we have done before.
I think this one is actually my favorite one so far. It's very story rich. So
Yes.
there's definitely a plot. And I think all of our past influencers, we get little, like a sentence. Whereas with today's influencer, we get chapters. And we'll get into it. But,
Yeah. But also this it is going to challenge
yeah.
the norm a little bit. All of our ancient influencers have had small parts in the Bible, but big parts in teaching us about faith. This one teaches us about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And also add some challenging questions in. But since we are just in the middle of June, what are you loving? What are you loving this summer?
Loving? What is hot? What is poppin'? I think my eyebrows are.
Your eyebrows are.
They're poppin'.
They look so good. So good. And one of our friends and
Yes, Sarah Vaughn.
church sisters, she is
Yeah.
a supporter of the podcast.
Yes.
Did your brows. You go to remind me what treatment you
So
did.
I did a brow lamination. She did a tint and shaping.
They look so good.
So yeah, it's definitely going to be added to my beauty routine. I want to be able to maintain this. So basically brow lamination is essentially a perm for your eyebrow hair. I think it works best after a shower or a face wash and some moisturizer. My little brush, I brush everything up and then I can shape it. And it's so easy.
I can't wait to go do mine.
It's so I can't believe I never did this before.
It looks so good. And you wear minimal eye makeup sometimes. And
Yeah.
I feel like this just opens your eyes. It lifts everything.
Totally. My mom and my sister were like, "You look so different." I'm like, "I don't really think I do, but I guess
You look so good.
yeah, thick
So good.
eyebrows."
And if you mention That's What He Said, Sarah
Yes.
will offer a special discount
Yes.
for you. She does brows, she does eyebrows. So make sure you are checking her out. She is on our link tree
Yes.
to
So you
schedule an
can,
appointment.
yeah, you can book an appointment through the link in our bio. There's nowhere to put "That's What He Said" in your appointment when you're making it. You might be able to put it in the notes, but if you can't put it in the notes, definitely just bring it up while you are there getting your services done, and she can apply the appropriate codes. So it is $30 off of lash services and 20% off of a first time service of any of the other services that she provides. So make sure you
really
take
good.
advantage of that. It's
Yes.
the time to get pretty, time to just embrace the sun, and
It's the season to do it because if you're traveling and if you can do like the brows or if you do your lashes and you're traveling, that takes out a whole step. Like if you're going to the beach and you just want to walk out of your hotel room and not have to deal with anything, I mean, you have a very completed look when you
Yeah.
roll out of bed in the morning. So it's perfect.
and it's simple as a brush. That's
I love it. I'm so excited to do it.
What about you, Lauren? What are you loving this summer?
So I get I feel like I get hyper fixated on treats, snacks, to the point where I will eat the same treat or snack every single night for a month until I find a new one.
Well, what is it?
Or so right now it's so crazy. My fixation that I'm loving and obsessed with is electrolyte powder in my water. I know this sounds ridiculous. So we sold this on the home shopping channel I work with.
Yeah.
It's watermelon flavored. I am completely obsessed. Every night now, I'm putting it in my water. I use my little like frother that you use for coffee creamer, and I make sure it's all mixed up,
Oh.
and then I fill it with ice, and I get it super cold, and it's my delicious.
Wow, a little hydrating
Like,
drink before
treat.
bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
That's my little obsession right now, and I feel so good because I'll come home and I'm like, man, I really need some hydration. Let me get out my electrolyte packet. But that's kind of replaced my desserts right now.
That's great.
Because I go through my phases of, it was the wedding cake ice cream for a long time, and then it was lemon bar ice cream, and then it was key lime pie.
Wow, you are the dessert queen. All right, well,
Let's do it.
ready to dive into it?
So today's ancient influencer is Ishmael.
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 Ishmael
Ishmael?
or Ishmael? Ishmael.
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 I don't know.
Ishmael.
Ishmael.
I think Ishmael.
Ishmael. Yeah.
Ishmael. We find Ishmael in Genesis.
Yeah, I'd
bit in
say
the story.
like from chapters 16 to 25 is where Ishmael is, his storyline is, and that's what we were talking about earlier, is he isn't just a one-liner.
Yeah. His story is intertwined into the story of Abraham and Sarah, which I think most people, if you are even fairly familiar with your Bible, you likely know the story of Abraham and Sarah, and God's promise to Abraham to allow him to have
Numerous descendants.
descendants, the numbers of the stars.
Yeah.
And then Sarah, being in her older age, she started getting a little impatient. I was telling Lex before we started recording, we were talking about just life and where we want to live, and if we want to stay at home and take care of our kids and go to lunch at little cafes
On a Wednesday afternoon.
do our thing. And I was like, well, let's not be like Sarah. Let's not do anything too crazy.
Moral of the story, wait on God.
Yes.
Wait on God, because he will still bless you, as we will see, but if you wait on God's plan and his promise, those blessings are exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask or think.
Right.
And that is proven in today's story.
It is. And that's actually where Ishmael comes into play, is when Sarah gets impatient. Then the result of that is Ishmael. But to kick us off, we are going to hop into our
time machine.
That's What He Said time machine. What was our song? Dun 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 dun.
Okay.
Woo, here we are.
We are here. We are in the Middle Bronze Age. Everyone, rock out. We're in the Middle Bronze Age. Let's go. I think if we were to have a rock concert in the Middle Bronze Age, we would be crucified. We would be like sacrificed for sure.
Tell me about it.
Well, I'm about to.
Okay, back to the Bronze Age.
Back to the Middle Bronze Age. So, okay, you remember how we were talking about like before Christ, after death, like that whole timeline change and everything? So this is actually before Christ. This was before Jesus was born, obviously. So we're going to go back 2,000 years before Jesus was born, about. And when you're counting those years, you kind of count backwards.
Right.
So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
So the year is 2078 BC. During this time, okay, these are the interesting facts. I'm not going to let you read them. These were the interesting facts about what was going on in the world around this time.
I'm so
Are
excited.
you ready?
Yes.
Okay, fun fact number 1. Potatoes are grown in Argentina.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
Potatoes were this old?
Yeah, in Argentina.
People were in Argentina.
Yeah.
Were people in Argentina?
Yeah. Yeah.
What people?
Native Americans.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
This is so crazy.
You don't think about what's going on.
You don't.
So, irrigation systems appear in Egypt.
Okay.
Mathematics appears in Babylonia.
They were smart in the ancient times.
They were, especially in that area, Mesopotamia. Stonehenge was being constructed in England and Great Britain.
Wait, what kind of people were in England?
Celtics.
Okay. I know I have to keep asking
Celtic
this,
tribes.
but I just...
Yeah.
All this stuff is so
Celtic
intriguing.
tribes derived from Europe, the Germanic tribes. And then cuneiform and hieroglyphics were well established at this point. So there were writing systems during this time. A fun fact that I didn't really know until kind of recently, Abraham, who is involved in the story today, lived in a polytheistic society, meaning they believed in more than one god. And this was in the city of Ur, which was in Mesopotamia. Abraham, because he lived in a polytheistic society, he is credited with being the first person to teach the concept of monotheism, believing and worshiping one God. And we know the story. Abraham heard God's voice instructing him to leave Ur, his homeland, and began his journey to what we know now as the Promised Land. Back then it was known as Canaan. He makes his stops along the way, but my point is, in doing so and listening to God, the establishment of Judaism through God's covenant with Abraham is established at this point. So the covenant that he made with God establishes one of the three major religions.
This is very interesting because we're going to see as the story continues, this is actually the very start of not one but three religions.
The Abrahamic religions, they call them.
Stretching outward from this one root, you see.
From this one man. Wow.
Pretty incredible.
Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right arm. Did you ever sing that song?
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. That was a time machine back to Lex's past. One that you won't get in very often. Okay, well that is like the cool historical background and context of the story.
I love it. Our resident historian. Now to dive into the story of Ishmael. As we mentioned, this is taking place 10 years actually after Abraham has left.
When he leaves his homeland Ur.
Okay.
And his travels, he has finally made it to Canaan, and he's been there for 10 years.
So he's made it to the Promised Land.
Correct.
And essentially what happens is Sarah got impatient. She was like, God said we would have all these offspring to number the stars in the sky. I'm getting to be an older lady. When is this going to happen for me?
Yeah.
It's basically how Alexis and I feel. We are getting to be older ladies.
Trust in you, God.
Yes. I trust in God.
I trust in God.
So she gets a little impatient and she decides, you know what? I will take matters into my own hands, which we know never leads to anything great. And she encourages, which we actually learned in our research previously, this was kind of something that happened back in that time.
Yeah, so it was referenced in the Code of Hammurabi, which is an ancient code system.
Yeah. So I wonder if this would happen when the wife couldn't bear children. I would imagine that would be what would lead to this.
I would assume so, yeah.
Sarah tells Abraham, go ahead, have a child.
Yeah, be with my servant, Hagar.
With my Egyptian servant, Hagar.
Abraham seems to have no hesitation.
Well, he's a man.
Yeah.
His wife said go, and he went. So Abraham has a child with Hagar, which is Ishmael. This is Abraham's first offspring. Mm-hmm. However, it's not the way God intended it for it to be. And so we're going to see how that begins to unravel. And Ishmael means God hears. Mm-hmm. And there's reasoning for that too. as we were reading, when Hagar is expecting Ishmael, she goes out into the desert. She's trying to get away. This was pretty much frowned upon. You're supposed to stay with this family because you're going to just hand that child over to this family. She goes out into the desert, and Genesis 16:11 through 12, Alexis pulled some amazing verses for us to share with you guys to really tie this story together. She is in the desert, and this is what happens. The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant. You will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael. For the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man." Why can't I say that without laughing?
I don't know, but those are some choice words. And I didn't say it, the Bible does.
He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all of his brothers. And I think that is major foreshadowing of what is to come
big time
with Ishmael.
It speaks
pretty direct
volumes.
From God.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think that God is using little codes and phrases, and sometimes it's a lot more direct than we realize.
Yeah, I think we don't realize that, and we try to make sense of something when it is so direct.
Mm-hmm. It's like straight up, this is how it's gonna be.
This is how him and his descendants are gonna be. So that's the meaning behind God hears, is he did recognize, and he did see Hagar, and he did see her struggle, and he did see her down, but he made her get back up and go back and basically perform her purpose to this story. And her purpose in this life was to provide Abram with his firstborn son.
As we are looking at these verses and the foreshadowing, it's going to point to this,
what we know,
overarching conclusion that we had both come to learn about, and we were like, wait, we actually need to dig deeper into this, because it was like, whoa, I don't think it's talked about enough.
I don't think so either. I think this would be a really good conversation starter.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
In Jewish and Islamic traditions, Ishmael is believed to be the progenitor of the Arabic people and the ancestor to the Prophet Muhammad, who is the main guy in Islam.
Right.
So not only do you have Abraham, the guy who is coined with discovering and practicing the term monotheism, the worship and belief in one God. God promises him descendants as many as the stars can be. And then there's great nations. He also promised great nations. Off the bat, you have Ishmael. And there's so many things that you can think before Isaac comes into the story. And it's okay, well, Ishmael must be the one, right?
Well, because in those times it would be the firstborn son.
There's inheritance, there's birthrights.
Yeah, carry on the family name.
Yeah.
And basically what we end up seeing is a split. Once Sarah does give birth down the road to her first son, Isaac, then you've got these two brothers, and there begins to be some division, some unrest in the household. Essentially, Sarah's like, hey, look, now I've given you a son.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but like, now I've given you a son. These two need to go.
Yeah, she's like, there's no way in heck Ishmael is going to receive what was promised to Isaac.
Yeah.
This is essentially
like
what she tells.
My son, our real family.
Right. Keep in mind, though, she's the one who pushed Hagar and Abraham together. So.
Yeah. Abraham ends up sending Hagar and Ishmael into the desert. And on the way into the desert, this is really amazing too, is Hagar encounters God for the second time.
In the desert.
So it's not as if Hagar is just thrown away. Though Abraham says, go, you got to go. She's not forgotten by God, because God comes to her again.
Yeah.
And they're in the desert, they're running out of food, they're running out of water, and he actually cares for them. Even mentions that God is with Ishmael as he's growing up.
Yes.
And he is with Ishmael and Hagar, and they end up not even going back to Egypt. They decide, you know what, we're just going to settle in the desert.
And there's actually a verse for that, Genesis 21:20. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him in Egypt. So you're right. God did not just forget about them. He did not discard them. He still had a purpose for them. Ishmael was still blessed, and he was still promised many sons as well. He was also promised a great nation to come through by him. Now, God's covenant was not established with him. That is the difference. And God's covenant was reserved for Isaac. But I think it's important to note that Ishmael was still blessed by God and his mom. I would venture to say that God cared about them just as much as he did Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, and then Isaac's line.
Well, and as he cares for each one of his children the same.
Yeah.
In the eyes of God, we're all his children. We're all equally loved.
But we each have a different purpose. The scripture gives so much to us. Like you were saying.
A lot.
Kind of in your face. So
God's pretty clear.
He's pretty clear. And so you were saying that Hagar and Ishmael are basically exiled into the desert. But before that, before Isaac is born, Abraham and God are talking. And Abraham is still questioning God almost in a sense. And God, in Genesis 17:19 through 22, he again states, Sarah is going to bear you a son. You will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. Setting the tone for not only Jewish religion and tradition, but ultimately Christianity. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers and will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. So God still makes it a point not only to tell Hagar when she's in the desert, but beforehand, before Isaac's even born, I have plans for him.
Right.
And he's still going to be blessed.
What is interesting to me here, though, is as we just kind of have briefly touched on, is we can now draw to the conclusion that Ishmael was at the root of the Islamic tradition. So I find it very interesting because God is saying this, and this is pointing to the fact that God is all-knowing.
Yeah.
God knows that from Ishmael will come another religion that is a opponent to the Christian faith. I don't know if that's the perfect word.
I would just say that he's a piece to the puzzle.
Right. But it's like God.
Like he knew that he would be and I even hate to say this, but that Islam would kind of be a thorn in the side to the world.
But being an all-knowing God, he still allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. They're in the desert. They don't have water or food. God could have left them there and been like, well, there you go. I don't have to worry about that. That's just
but
like...
He chose to still,
exactly
make him who he is.
Which makes me think and gives me so much hope and thought in my mind that just God knows that Christianity will prevail and prosper. And again, as Christians, we're never promised that life is going to be easy, but we have peace and joy through him. And so he knows there's going to be this opposition to the Christian faith, and he allows it to happen. And that just speaks to
his providence. He does have it all in control, and there's an intention behind every single decision that he makes.
And we have to remember too, at this time, Satan already exists. So he's already mixing himself in everything as well. And so I found that one part interesting because you had read how Genesis 21:20, God was with the boy as he grew up. And here God is showing up continuously in Ishmael's life. And I had pointed that out in the notes. I had circled it because I thought how interesting it is that God is with this boy as he's growing up, but yet that ultimately leads to a completely different faith. And I thought, that wording, right? We try to analyze things, and sometimes he's very, very just like blunt as he grew up. So it made me wonder, okay, so as Ishmael got older, did he open that door where Satan was able to slither in?
Yeah.
Did he fall, astray from God? He does marry an Egyptian woman. Maybe that could play into it. We don't know those facts.
No, but what we do know is that his descendants, even his descendants until the time of King David, we know that his descendants were desert dwelling. We also know that they were violent.
They were hostile.
They were very hostile towards their brothers. The Bible says other tribes and his brothers.
Yep, they lived in hostility toward all the tribes related to them.
So to me, that infers within this Abrahamic tree of descendants and peoples that stemmed from Abraham as the progenitor, Ishmael's descendants were always going to be at odds with the rest of Abraham's children, whether it be Isaac or the other sons and kids that he had.
Right.
They were always going to be at odds with each other. And so, I think it is fair to conclude, or at least infer, that something happened. The Bible's not clear.
But there was a shift.
But
because if God was with him when he was growing up, there had to be some point where he turned away from God. Because God is very clearly with the other descendants.
Yeah.
So for him to be so hostile toward them, obviously he went through something. So,
I'm sure that
came into play.
there was a lot, maybe rejection. I don't know what rejection felt like in the Middle Bronze Age.
But I think
to have your birthright taken away from you, I know, is a big deal.
The spirit of rejection can become something that can...
Jealousy, and that he was robbed of something that he believed to be his. So many different feelings that, if you don't have God in your life, can lead to darkness.
Yeah. Well, and I think as we look at a broader picture, and as we look at Ishmael's lineage leading to
Muhammad,
the Muslim faith, and then we look at Isaac, and then Abraham, Isaac, that lineage ultimately leading to the Christian faith through the Jewish faith. You see hostility through these faiths beyond the people,
and through time,
through their bloodline, through generations. And we talk about, in church, and we talk about generational curses.
Yes.
And it's like that spirit of jealousy and hostility and anger can be passed down unless it's healed from generation to generation. So by now we've built up these religions that have hostility towards
for like
each other.
5,000 years almost 5,000 years of that built up animosity towards each other.
Something that I had written out, and I told Alexis before, and I said it, this is going to sound really wild, and it's going to be a really bold statement, but
I say go for it.
As I read this, to me, it's very clear that the Islamic tradition was born out of sin. And you had written on that as well.
I think
when something is born out of sin, that is when you will get the attachments of things like generational curses. I think in this case, what's carried through that is anger and hostility that then had rooted into a whole...
So into not only a religious, not just
a person, but a religion.
And a culture and a peoples, and it turns into regional conflict like we see today, fighting over land.
You're seeing this connection that is starting in 2078 BC.
Yeah.
This hostility is stemming from there, and it's still going on today.
Still.
And it started with people. I mean, we were hearing that one of the reasons that Sarah said they got to go is because Ishmael was
mocking Isaac.
Picking on Isaac. Isaac was a younger child.
Yeah.
That conflict between two human beings is now, over time, a conflict between two
peoples, like groups of people. And to tie it all together, Ishmael is a very significant character in the Bible. I think on one hand, it shows God's faithfulness and that he can use whatever is there, even after human error, sin, imperfection. Ishmael's birth was a result of Sarah's impatience and her acting on her own volition, trying to fulfill God's promise to her in her own way. I'd be like highlighting the dangers of trying to manipulate God's plan with your own desires can have generational effects. And
literally the exact words in my mind when you
really
said that.
Generational what did I say?
Effects
of
a ripple effect.
A ripple effect of you not trusting God in his own timing. And
if you do it on your own, it won't be right.
Yeah.
It won't be right, and it will never be right.
And
you can make it right.
Yeah. Yes, you can. I would venture to say that Islam is one of the top 3 religions in the world. The Middle East is primarily Muslim. So God's promise to Ishmael was still carried out. They still became a great nation. They still became numerous descendants, spread all over. But to what extent? Right?
And to what detriment?
And to what detriment?
But God knew.
God knew what would happen, and he still knows. He knows what's coming and what's going to happen, and I think it's just an opportunity
to
trust in him. Again, another opportunity for us to trust in him.
Well, and even I think right now in these moments, you were saying, you've had a lot of anxiety and just with current events, and you can see this, and it's clear God knew, he knows.
Yeah.
And so the only option is to trust him, and that's just where faith comes in, right? I'm just still mind blown. And you made a really good point that Ishmael isn't mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah, he's not. He's, aside from being known as a prophet, he's not mentioned in the Quran. However, he is mentioned in what is called extra scriptural sources. So outer religious studies and papers and stuff. He is mentioned
and things
in those. But I think it's really interesting that the Quran doesn't mention him at all, but he's supposed to be the progenitor of that line and those peoples. But the Bible lays, pretty, to the point we're talking about him today, like enough detail to be able to determine who he is and what his purpose was, and ultimately, like, down the road, what will happen.
Well, and I found it, let me see what I screenshotted, because I was curious. The Quran refers to Christians along with Jews as people of the book, indicating that they are considered recipients of God's revelation through prophets, and it acknowledges that they have a shared belief in God between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. But what I just found so interesting is they do acknowledge that Christians and Jews have a connection to God.
Yeah.
So they're
But that's crazy to me because, and now we're kind of getting in the weeds, but I'm okay with that. They call us infidels. And so, and look,
this is just water.
yeah, well, I'm just taking a sip here. But, and maybe that's just the radical side. I don't know.
But also, I was struggling because when I was looking up this information, you know, I just felt like I was seeing the same thing over and over again. That all I kept seeing on my internet search was the Islamic faith is accepting of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith as well. I just kept seeing it over because I kept trying different things. Okay, Islamic perspective on the Christian faith, Islamic perspective on the Jewish faith. And all I kept seeing is the Islamic faith is accepting of Christians, and I'm just like, but that's not the reality that we see.
No, it's
so
not.
To me, it almost felt a bit like, okay, is the information that we have access to a little bit skewed? And this is my own personal opinion. I'm not saying that that's a fact that, you know, that information is being withheld from us, but I do believe our government's not above it.
Well, and that gets even crazier.
The people who
when
control
you
the internet aren't above it.
Well, when you consider who might be in control of the internet, it becomes even more of a crazy thing to wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
And if you know what I'm inferring, you know what I'm inferring. I'm not going to spell it out, but that's even crazier.
So that was interesting. And like you said, I mean, radicalism is, it's like with anything, you have people that are.
But unfortunately with Islam, and I mean, I don't know if we'll end up keeping all of this in or not, but I mean, I'm fine with it. But
no boundaries.
No, I mean, maybe this is where we start becoming a little bit more bold. The face of Islam is not peace.
Right.
It's not. And I don't know. I struggle. This is very much a struggle for me.
Mm-hmm.
And while a lot of this was eye-opening and can help me navigate how to treat people on a human level,
knowing that we're all descendants from
God. Yes, and we're all through the new covenant which is through Jesus Christ and his sacrifice, we are all God's children, and we all have the opportunity to be saved. But we still are human, and we still live in a world that carries on these consequences.
We have seen evidence in our society, in our years of growing up as Christians, as Americans, the spirit of hostility from the Muslim faith.
Yeah.
There's a spirit of hostility. And I think the answer to that is always, oh, but those are radical Muslims. That's always the answer to the fear of Muslims. Well, that's the radicals. Yeah. But you have the ability to cut that off and separate yourself from it, because are there radicalized Christian groups? Absolutely.
For sure.
But do we as Christians as a whole condone it? No. We separate ourselves from it. Mm-hmm. So if you have the power to separate yourself from it, why would you not?
For me, I think it's the whole how they treat women. It doesn't. I'm speaking from also my own experience. My dad works in the Middle East, and it's an interesting perspective because he has come to respect their religion, and I can't come to terms with it because I don't know. I guess I'm not there, and he is spending time with the culture and the people, but he also is in a more peaceful region. of the Middle East. So I don't, that goes back to the whole radicalism. It's just difficult. And I think this is just us being super transparent, as we always strive to be. But you can't ignore what the Bible does say.
Well, the number one takeaway, and we will all hold our own opinions based on experiences, based on our worldview, but what we can gather from God's word, from what he said, and through Ishmael, God allowed, and not directly through him, but
just down the line, I think he opened it up to what we would know to be the existing conflict that exists today.
So God allowed the birth of the Islamic faith.
Yeah.
And we hope that knowing that will, one, just encourage you to trust God.
Yeah.
Because he is all-knowing. And two, if you do have, strong feelings and mixed feelings, and like Alexis and I do, to trust in God, to trust in his overall reign
and
his plan. Because he's not, we know that he's coming back and will prevail.
Yeah.
And what happens before that, only God knows.
Yeah, only God knows. And he doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
So this was all intentional. It all has a purpose. He allowed Hagar and Ishmael to survive in the desert. He promised them great things. And those great things have come to pass. And he also said that his descendants would be in conflict with the rest of the world.
And we're seeing it lived out.
And we're seeing it lived out. And this is, I'm speaking to myself with what I'm about to say, is that being said, and with us holding the opinions that we have, everyone has the ability to come to Christ. Everyone has the ability to be forgiven of sins. Everyone has the ability to start a new life. And I think not only leaning into the fact that God has it in control, but also trying to alter the way I view things, in that there's still an opportunity to win people over. Even though they are considered God's children, you are only saved through faith in Jesus Christ.
It's very interesting. I almost wonder if utilizing this story as a tool in,
like, sparking conversations with
people of the Islamic faith.
Yeah. And it's really, really interesting, since we're on the topic. But one interesting fact is, recently, I think in the Islamic faith, dreams are big prophetic signs. And I think I've shared this with you. There have been an overwhelming amount of Muslims who have had dreams of Jesus and who have converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
And because the dreams are a form of the prophetic. So it means something when someone like that appears in your dreams.
Yeah.
So there's hope.
And there's also, we were having ice cream when I was back in Dallas last weekend. There was a large Muslim family. And I noticed my mom kind of glancing over. I was like, Mom. And she's like, I was praying for them. And there is power in that, in praying over people. And my mom struggled for a very long time, not understanding how, if you don't have access to the Christian religion, how is it fair that you wouldn't go to heaven? And I worked this through with my discipleship partner back in Dallas. And she was a pastor at our church, and she had explained to me that essentially God will present himself to everyone. Everyone will have something.
An encounter.
They will have the
Like the ability
the
to
ability
come to him.
to know him.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of, and that's so hard to even wrap your mind around, because you're like, well, if you live in these other countries, even if you,
or like a remote island, like that was one of Wes Huff was on a podcast with some comedians recently, and that was one of the questions was, so does someone who lives on a remote island who's never heard of anybody, can they still get to heaven?
They could probably have some really cool conversations with Jesus.
Oh, sure. But the answer to that question was similar to what you just said, was that ultimately everyone will have an encounter with God, and how that happens is unique to the situation. I think he will make himself known, and he's done that throughout Scripture and throughout history. So no one is too far gone. I'm going to be working on my heart, although it's hard, and know that just God is in control, especially right now, and what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah. All right, my friends. That was a deep dive. That
was a big old bite to chew.
But so interesting. And
very interesting.
True. Like, I don't know. The Bible is just such a wild book, and it's like, man.
You never know what
that is a, what did they used to call them? True Hollywood Stories. Well, that right there is that's hilarious. A Bible.
That was a Bible story.
That is a true Bible story. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There is a lot in that book. So make sure you're reading it. And also, like, as you're reading through, it might stick out to you more, because you're going to see, as you go through time, different battles and different encounters. You will hear of the Ishmaelites and the Midianites.
Yeah, well, they're just the Ishmaelites turn into so many different tribes and groups of people. The Moabites, the Amorites, loaded in the Bible. I mean, those people are everywhere in the Bible, and it's just that region. So
now it's going to start clicking.
Yeah, like start in Genesis 16. Well, read the whole Bible, but start in Genesis 16 to read through the story, and then as you find yourself reading through the Bible, these descendants will become known under different names, but just know that they are descendants of Ishmael.
There you have it.
There it is.
All right, friends, we will see you next Friday. Have a blessed weekend. If you can, get into your local church this Sunday. I'm telling you, it'll make you feel better. It'll warm your heart.
Love ya.